Let us talk about the ode. What is an ode? An ode is a lyrical stanza, a poem written in praise of a person, event, or thing. The form developed in ancient Greece and had a very specific and elaborate structure involving three parts known as the strophe, antistrophe, and earpod. Originally, Greek odes were set to music. The form was later popularized and adapted in Renaissance England and led to a new set of conventions. The word ode comes originally from the Greek word meaning song. The definition of ode has thus clearly changed over time, as now it is often used colloquially to refer to any praise or glorification of an individual or thing. Types of odes. In ancient Greek poetry, there were three types of odes: Pindaric odes, Horatian odes, and irregular odes. Not surprisingly, the Pindaric ode is named after the Greek poet Pindar, and the Horatian ode is named after the Roman poet Horace. Pindar is often credited with creating the ode form. This original form of the ode contained the formal opening of the strophe, the mirroring stanza called the antistrophe, which has the same meter and length of the strophe, and the concluding earpod, which has a different meter and length than the previous two sections. These ode examples were originally performed by a chorus and accompanied by dancers and instruments such as the aulos and lyre. Horatian ode, known as the homostrophic ode. Each stanza in the Horatian ode form has the same meter, rhyme scheme, and length. This is not the only difference from the Pindaric ode. Horatian odes are also less formal and more intimate and reflective. Horatian odes generally have 2 or 4 line stanzas. Irregular odes use rhyme schemes and meter but do not have the same stanzaic structure as either the Pindaric or the Horatian odes. There is no correspondence between the different parts as there is in the other two forms, and the rhyme scheme requires lines only to rhyme somewhere and not in a particular place. Let us look at the significance of ode in literature. The ode has held an elevated position in the history of literature. Pindaric odes were often written and performed to celebrate athletic victories, while much later Romantic poets wrote odes in English to celebrate their strongest sentiments and deepest admirations. The ode suited both of these time periods well due to the love of drama in both ancient Greece and in the Romantic period at the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century. The first known odes written in English were the Epithalamium and Prothalamium by Edmund Spenser, but the form really took off with the irregular odes of Abraham Cowley. The Romantic poets William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, and Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote the most famous examples of odes in the English language. Thomas Gray's The Progress of Poesy is an excellent English example of ode in the Pindaric tradition. Alexander Pope's Ode on Solitude is a beautiful example of an ode in the Horatian tradition. John Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn is perhaps the most well known ode ever written. This is an example of an irregular ode. There is rhyme throughout, but it is not as strict as other rhyme forms. Keats wrote this poem to glorify the virtues of classical Greek art. Therefore, no other poetic form is as fitting as the ode, which is an example of classical Greek art itself. Let us talk about some of the distinguishing features of the ode. Like its parent form, the lyric, the ode is of Greek origin. It is a serious and dignified composition. It is exalted in subject matter and elevated in tone and style. Neither the theme nor its treatment can be trivial or undignified. The poet is serious both in the choice of his subject and the manner of its presentation. He must show himself at the height of his power. Note, for example, the difference between the style of Wordsworth's poems on simple country scenes and incidents uh, and that of his sublime ode on intimations of immortality. The ode is almost always in rhyme and longer than the lyric proper. For the emotion it embodies is of a kind that admits of development. It does not, like the lyric, aim at giving the effect of unpremeditated art. It may be full of deep and sincere emotion, but its expression is expected to be much more consciously elaborate, impressive, and diffuse. And the ode is often in the form of an address and is sometimes used to commemorate an important public occasion. So, unlike other forms of verse, the ode is often addressed directly to the being or the object it treats of. The opening lines sometimes contain an apostrophe or appeal, which is characteristic of the whole treatment of the poem. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind begins, "O wild west wind." Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn, "Thou still unravished bride of quietness." Tennyson's To Virgil begins thus, "Roman Virgil, thou that singest," and so on. The mood is maintained throughout in each case. Sometimes the ode has for its theme an important public event, like a national jubilee, the death of a distinguished personage, the commemoration of the founding of a great university. Marvel's upon Cromwell's return from Ireland and Tennyson's Ode on the Death of the Duke of Wellington are instances in point. Except for a few attempts in the Pindaric or the Horatian form, the English ode has pursued a course of its own as regards subject matter and style, treatment and outlook, not strictly bound by classical traditions. It is either regular, consisting of a series of exactly similar stanzas, like the odes of Shelley and Keats, or irregular, when each stanza follows a different arrangement, as in Wordsworth's Immortality Ode and several of the odes of Tennyson and Bridges.